Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. Ladies and gentlemen, what do you need? Yeah, sure. Yeah, fine. Ladies and gentlemen, in a couple moments we will be starting the funeral service. If I can kindly ask everyone to please be seated. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time we're going to begin the funeral service of Mrs. Surrie Melnick. Rabbi Emeritus Beth Hillel B'nai Emunah, Rabbi Alan Kensky will be officiating, and Cantor Howard Friedland from the Jewish Reconstructionist Congregation. For those of you who are here in attendance, please take a moment to be sure that your cellular phones or anything that makes noise are turned off, and we welcome those of you who are joining us online. This time we're going to begin the service for Mrs. Melnick.
The 23rd Psalm. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, Binot dashe yarbitzeni, al menuchot, Yenachaleni, Nafshi Yeshovev, Yancheni v'magle tzedek, Yancheni v'magle tzedek, למען שמו. גם כי אלך בגיא צל מוות, לא יירא כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני. תבוך לפני, שולחן נגד צוררי. דישן טוב ושמן ראשי, כוסי רוויים. אך טוב החסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. אדוני רואי לא אחסר, Adonai Eloi lo echsar.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. God has me lie down in green pastures. God leads me beside the still waters. God guides me on paths of righteousness. God revives my soul for the sake of God's glory. Though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your staff and your rod do comfort me. You set a table in sight of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall abide in the house of the Lord forever. I read from the book of Ecclesiastes, Kohelet. A season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for planting and a time for reaping, a time for keeping and a time for discarding, a time for loving and a time for hating, a time for embracing and a time for refraining, a time for slaying and a time for healing, a time for laughing and a time for weeping, a time for dancing and a time for wailing, a time for birthing and a time for dying, a time for speaking and a time for silence, a time for seeking and a time for losing. I read from the book of Proverbs, the very famous reading of Woman of Valor, Eshet Chayil, because that's what Surrie was. Eshet Chayil miimtza, v'rachok mipninim michra. A woman of valor who can find, her worth is far above rubies. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and nothing shall he lack. She renders him good and not evil all the days of her life. She opens her hand to the needy and extends her hand to the poor. She is robed in strength and dignity and cheerfully faces whatever may come. She opens her mouth with wisdom. Her tongue is guided by kindness. She tends to the affairs of her household and eats not the bread of idleness. Her children come forward and bless her, her husband too, and he praises her. Many women have done superbly, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a God-revering woman is much to be praised. Place before her the fruit of her hands. Wherever people gather, her deeds speak her praise. Almighty God, Ribbonu Shel Olam, Lord of the living and the dead, the hearts of your children who mourn are heavy with grief. Give them comfort. Help them to remember the triumphs and the joys in the life of Surrie Melnick. Help them to treasure what is theirs because Surrie lived. Help them to meet grief with courage, to confront the angel of death with life. When despair threatens, when faith falters, sustain us all, O Lord, our refuge and our strength, our ever-present help, and let us say, Amen. It is less than a year and a half ago that we were here together to mourn the passing of Ed Melnick. And here we are today to bid farewell to Surrie, a beloved mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother, aunt, relative, congregant, and friend. In a way, it is not unexpected that after a beautiful marriage of 78 years, that Surrie's passing would follow so closely after that of her beloved life partner. The two were inseparable in life. The biblical words on the passing of Saul and Jonathan come to mind: beloved in life, not separated in death. Surrie's passing so close to the end of the year of mourning for Ed is a difficult loss for the family. An era in the life of the family has come to an end. But the legacy and the imprint that Surrie and Ed Melnick have left on their family will long endure. Surrie's devotion, her sweetness, and the dignity with which she lived her life will inspire her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren for many years to come. Surrie's story began on the west side of Chicago. She was the youngest of 4 children born to Moshe and Lena Kaufman, immigrants from Eastern Europe. Her parents worked in the local garment industry. Surrie's original English name was Sophie, but at home she was called Sorla, and on her own she changed her name to Surrie. Surrie graduated from Manly High School. She met Ed when in grammar school. As the story goes, they were in the same class in 5th grade, and it was Ed's task to fill the other students' inkwells. Ed took note of Surrie when he filled her inkwell. They were sweethearts in high school, and they married in 1942, when Surrie was but 18 years old. The wedding ceremony took place in a deli, but they honeymooned at the Drake Hotel. They were truly blessed in their 78 years of marriage. Their love was as strong at 78 years as when they first married. Ed and Surrie were a team. They complemented one another, and they worked side by side for many years. Soon after they were married, Ed joined the Army. Surrie, on the home front, worked as a bookkeeper. After the war, they lived with Surrie's parents for a while before moving to Budlong Woods, where they raised Ben, Lester, and Nina. They moved to Wilmette in 1977 and lived in the same home, just a few blocks from Beth Hillel B'nai Emunah, ever since. Ed and Surrie were longtime devoted members of Beth Hillel. When I came to the synagogue, they were regular Shabbat morning worshipers. I can picture them sitting on the aisle towards the rear of the sanctuary. They were there at the very start of services and always greeted me warmly. Surrie's smile was especially warm and beautiful. Ed and Surrie celebrated many an anniversary at the synagogue with the joint aliyah to the Torah and a blessing. Their pride and joy in rising to the Torah to celebrate these milestones was palpable, and the example they set was an inspiration for the congregation. When Ben, Lester, and Nina were on their own, Surrie went back to work as a bookkeeper at the Beret Company. But over time, the main focus of her activities became working with Ed in his business. In the years that Ed ran his own company, Surrie served as his bookkeeper and worked in the office side by side with him. She acquired computer skills early, while Ed did the sales work and developed relationships with his clients. Surrie saw to it that the paperwork and the financial aspects of the business were taken care of. Surrie and Ed had an equal role in the success of the business. Surrie was always close with her extended family, with her siblings and their children, and was an active member of the Glassman Family Club. She was a member of Hadassah and the bowling league. She enjoyed knitting and crocheting, and knitted many a sweater for members of the family. She sewed. She played Scrabble and crossword puzzles. She was always reading. She read the newspaper and listened to the news on the radio at night. She knew what was going on in the world. Surrie and Ed enjoyed travel, especially to family simchas. They enjoy the celebrations at their own weddings' anniversaries. Surrie was a great holiday chef, and she made all the holidays special. The 2 large family seders with many guests were the highlight of the year. Surrie was a wonderful, loving mother to Ben, Lester, and Nina. She was fully supportive and always encouraging them. She was deeply proud of their accomplishments. They were inspired by the courage she showed at times of crisis in the family. Surrie is remembered fondly by their friends as Mrs. Melnick. Surrie is mourned deeply today by Ben and Diane, Lester, Nina, and Erwin. Surrie was a loving, generous grandmother who communicated regularly with her grandchildren and kept up individual relationships with them despite physical distance. She was a true presence in their lives and was proud of all of them. Mourning Surrie's passing today are Ilana and Stephen, Julie and Louis, Ian and Lauren, Lena and Everett and Jamie. The 6 great-grandchildren were the icing on the cake for Surrie and Ed, and they took pride and joy in Dahlia, Ziggy and Joey, Emma and Olive, and Noah. Surrie's family wishes to thank Surrie's caregivers for the devotion they showed to Surrie, which let her live her last years in dignity and comfort. The family thanks Nomi for her constant attention and devotion to Surrie, and Gina for her loving supervision of Surrie's care. The family also thanks Chef Mike Kerner for his providing delicious meals for the home. Surrie lived her last years blessed by the love of family, as well as the support of her caregiving team. Yesterday in our synagogues, in our cycle of reading from the Torah, we met the biblical Sarah, first known as Sarai, for the very first time. I have thought of the significance of this coincidence for the passing of our Sarah, our beloved Surrie. The biblical Sarah may have lived thousands of years ago, but we read her story each year, and she is a part of our Jewish story. Similarly, your beloved Surrie, your beloved mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, aunt, and relative will forever be part of your story. You will tell it and retell it, and the story of your beloved Surrie Melnick will continue to inspire you. She has helped make you who you are today. She, along with your beloved father and grandfather of blessed memory, instilled in you many of those values that guide your lives today. You will continue to tell her story for years to come. May the soul of Surrie Melnick, Sarah bat Moshe Veriva Leah, be bound in the bond of everlasting life Tehei nishmata tzrura b'tzror hachayim. And let us say, Amen. I now call on Surrie's son, Dr. Lester Melnick.
Thank you, Rabbi. Let's see. It was just last year that I was at the same podium talking about my dad, who had passed away at the age of 98. He and my mom were inseparable, married for 78 years, together for close to 88 years. The only interruption was World War II. So now, after a gap of about 16 months, they are together again. It's a blessing, but it hurts. So Ben, Nina, and I were so fortunate to have both our parents for so long living independently in their own home. We knew it couldn't last forever. So now my siblings and I, all in our 70s, have become orphans. I know we'll adjust, but it's painful. I think all of you knew my mom. She was a kind person, always considerate of others. I never heard a foul word ever come from her mouth, although Nina remembers my mom would swear in Yiddish when she was driving her car. She was totally devoted to Dad, as he was to her. They were truly a team. For the most part, she always accompanied him in the car when he did business. He would go in to see customers, and she would stay in the car and read a book. At home in their office, they had 2 adjoining desks. While my dad was on the phone, always talking, I should say, she was doing all the accounting and bookkeeping. In fact, when her faculty started to falter 3-4 years ago, my dad had to learn how to write a check. Which is true, yeah. They enjoyed traveling together. They enjoyed family events. They enjoyed throwing parties. They were always together. My mom loved sending cards to all her relatives and friends for birthdays, anniversaries, or any occasions. She was always on her computer sending emails to friends and family. She liked to keep in touch. And of course, she loved the Hanukkah parties. She loved passing out the gelt. Usually it was $2 bills. It just gave her pleasure. And then I remember the walks we used to take. I was probably less than 10 years old, and it was in the old neighborhood. Very few families had 2 cars then. So we used to walk to Lincoln Avenue, which had Losby's drugstore, Schroeder's Bakery, which had great eclairs, and Sharon's soda fountain shop, where we got phosphates. It was always a fun time, just good memories. She tried to treat her children equally, although Nina was clearly her favorite daughter. Ben was her favorite firstborn, and me, I think the jury is still out. I remember this is an indelible memory. I was like 16, and we were, I think it was an orientation, University of Illinois in Champaign. I had never been there. And I remember we got on a Greyhound bus and we rode there together, and it was just comforting to have her with me at that time. During the last 3-4 years, as Mom became less verbal, we went from sharing political thriller books — we used to read a lot of books of the same nature — to playing simple card games where she said I was cheating, to just holding hands. It was all good. And I was very fortunate to be with Mom last week. I was in town last week, and I left for Arizona and then came back. But last week at a time when she became lucid for about a half hour. So I was able to put my phone on speaker and was able to call Nina and Bennett and Alana and Lena, and she was able to recognize them and say their names. Lena was able to sing "You Are My Sunshine," a song that she would sing to Bubby since she was like 3 years old. And Mom called out to Eddie, and I told her she would soon be together with Eddie, her sisters, her mother, her father, and then she seemed to relax, and I felt good. So, like the rabbi said, I'd also like to thank Normie and Gina for taking care of her this last year and a half, and for Mike, the chef, and his wife, Diana. And just to say, Mom, I'll miss you.
Now call on Surrie's daughter, Dr. Nina Silverstein.
Good afternoon. I want to thank you all for joining us in person and virtually to honor Mom's memory. Mom was born at home in 1924. It was either on April 25th or 26th. She only knew it was during Passover. Both of her parents, our Zadie Moishi and Bubby Lena, were immigrants from Eastern Europe, Russia, Ukraine, Romania. We were just told the borders kept on changing, a phrase that has taken on new meaning for me in recent times. Mom was the youngest of 4 sisters, Rena, Eva, Ida, and Surrie. And as the rabbi said before, although her name was Sophie, until she legally changed it in high school, she just preferred Surrie. She was very close with all her sisters, and they with her. As the youngest, she was well looked after and often accompanied Aunt Eva and Uncle Max during their courtship. She was not as rebellious as Aunt Ida, who married at 16, but likely followed her into occasional mischief. Aunt Ida even got Mom as a young mother to go horseback riding once. She never tried it again. She also never learned to swim, but could float. We are not sure if our grandmother got Mom excused from swimming in high school because Mom did not want to learn, or if our grandmother did not want her to. Another story I recall hearing about Mom's childhood was that she would take the streetcar by herself at age 9 to run errands for her mother, who was a seamstress and a breadwinner of the family. I mean, you could only imagine putting our child on a streetcar or a bus or anything by themselves at this point. The story, as the rabbi also indicated, was that Mom and Dad met in the 5th grade and were sweethearts ever since. Theirs was indeed a storybook romance that lasted 7 to 8 years of marriage, or 85 if you count since the 5th grade. The twinkle, the smile, the glimmer, the laughter they shared lasted until Dad left Mom, June 29, 2021. They were indeed partners for life and worked side by side, literally and figuratively, building a business and raising a family. She left her job as a bookkeeper, a company downtown, when Dad needed her to work with him. Their desk in the home office and at the business were really side by side always. And on the road, Mom in the passenger seat beside Dad when he went to see customers, often bringing them Italian beef sandwiches or deli from Manny's. Mom always saw good in people and cared about others. She never raised her voice. There was only one time I can recall when she lost her temper, and that was with Lester. I don't know what he did, but I can remember Mom shaking his head against the kitchen wall. Mom was an early adopter of technology, and in her 80s was adept at using her iMac computer and cell phone, using email to check in on some grandchildren and text messages to check in on others. She communicated often with each of her grandchildren, Alana, Julie, Ian, Lena, and Everett, and often knew more about what each was up to than did their own parents. But communication through handwritten letters and cards was her trademark. Her classically trained penmanship was beautiful and far more legible than Dad's. They always remembered holidays, birthdays, and anniversaries, and I'm sure many will recall the $2 bills for Hanukkah. That tradition lasted well into their 90s. But communication by phone was their favorite mode. My husband Erwin, as Mom affectionately called what's his name, felt that my mom had special radar and could detect whenever we were about to eat that first bite. It was not unusual for us to speak to Mom and Dad daily, if not multiple times a day, and I miss that. And then there were those that got the first calls in the morning. Her sisters, her childhood friend, Sophie Wilson, and cousin Mary Ann Schur. Mom was devoted to her family, those near and those far away. She and her cousins kept up the Glassman Family Club for a long time and made sure to have luncheons and gatherings whenever family visited from other states. One of my earliest memories of the large family was the large family Passover Seder at the Windermere Hotel and of family Hanukkah parties. Mom is the last of that wonderful generation of Glassman cousins. But that legacy continues. There's a new generation, and Mom and Dad were so pleased to attend the 2019 family reunion organized by the younger cousins, Ilana, Marcy, Aviva, and Elliot. My parents were very present in their grandchildren's lives. They made it a point to visit often while they were growing up and even made it out to see them on their college campuses, often meeting their friends and forever being known to all as Bubby and Zadie. Mom had special tastes in food. At different times of her life, she loved halava, Lerner's hot dogs, sunflower seeds, Snickers, Rocky Road ice cream, and Fannie Mae meltaways. And even most recently, Bennett discovered it was strawberry ice cream. She did not smoke or drink, but there was that one time when I accompanied my parents on an anniversary trip. It may have been their 25th to the Bahamas. They never left me home. And Mom had one too many rum drinks and heckled the entertainer. I never saw that again. Mom did not allow fear to stop her from what she needed to do. A good example of that is when Bennett, in his early teens, was on an Eagle Scout trip to Colorado and had an appendicitis attack. I can remember going to O'Hare and watching Mom on the tarmac, boarding an airplane to be with him. This was her first flight. Mom was an avid reader. She always had a book in her hand or close by, and books were always passed along among the family. I can recall shopping bags full of paperback books from Ritchie. At one point, she started marking an X on the inside cover to note that she had already read the book because books she had passed on were coming back to her. We come from a long line of worriers. My grandfather Moishi used to sit at the window on Rasher Avenue watching for us. Mom then took his place. And then when we became adults and on our own, it was expected that we provide our parents with our complete travel itineraries and contact information. Phone calls were always expected upon arrivals and departures. That expectation later applied to their grandchildren. I may not have understood it then, but I do now with my own children and grandchildren, that there is something reassuring knowing that someone cares if you get to where you need to go and back again. We are grateful for the loving care, support, and dignity she received from her caregivers, Normie and Gina. Communication remained between Mom and them even as Mom became less and less verbal. And we appreciate Mike, the personal chef that worked with Mom and Dad for many years and adjusted to Mom's diminishing tastes, knowing what to prepare that she still might enjoy, such as macaroni and cheese. As is the case with many at end of life, there are moments of lucidity. After refusing food and water for several days last week, Mom did have moments when she was alert. I had already returned to Boston last week, but my brother Lester, as he mentioned, called and put me on speaker to say a few words to Mom. She very clearly replied, "I love you." And that gift will sustain me. Lena was able to sing "You Are My Sunshine," and Alana caught her too, and both received "I love yous." And as I began my reflections that Mom was born at home, I now end with the knowledge that Mom died peacefully at home as well. Thank you.
Now call on Surrie's son-in-law, Dr. Erwin Silverstein.
Thank you, Rabbi. 42 years ago, my mom passed away. Now, I feel like it's happened again. Surrie was more of a mom than a mother-in-law to me, just like I know I was more of a son than a son-in-law to her. Even though, as Nina said, she jokingly referred to me as what's-his-name, she still felt I was one of her sons. She welcomed me into the Melnick family and treated my parents and me with love, compassion, and warmth. Yesterday, as I sat in the empty and eerily quiet house on Essex Place, I reflected fondly on past times there, enjoying Passover Seders and engaging with her in very competitive games of Scrabble. She also took pride in her bowling skills, and I still remember the time we went bowling and how she outplayed me game after game. That's an understatement. She thrashed me. Surrie Melnick always had a smile on her face, and I can't recall her ever saying anything negative about anybody. I wasn't there for the Lester incident. One of her favorite expressions was A1. This expression encapsulated her positive view of people and life. Nina would tell people I was the best dressed teacher at my high school. No survey was ever taken, but the shirts Mom would send me far exceeded in style and quality any shirts I'd ever previously worn. In August of 2020, Nina and I drove out here to visit Mom and Dad. Mom did not recognize me, and from that moment on, a deep sense of loss began for me. As difficult as the last few days have been for me, that time in August 2020 was the most difficult of all. Now, we all can take some comfort in the understanding that childhood sweethearts, Edward and Surrie, are together again. Goodbye, Mom. I will miss you dearly.
Now call on Surrie's granddaughter, Ilana Silverstein.
Thank you, Rabbi. I'd like to invite us all here and virtually to close your eyes and feel what it was like to have Bubby close to you or a memory of Bubby. Just close your eyes and take a moment. And think about a movement or a gesture or a shape that comes to mind. And when I say her name, we'll all do that together. Surrie. Begani Netaiticha, Begani Netaiticha, Begani Hamutsna Bilibi, Hasatar Gu Poratecha, Ya'am Ku Sharach Shacha Bo. Sorry, B. Umeshachan Ad Laila, Lo Yishkot Lo Yergia Hagan, Ze Atabo, Baal Fe Itz Parecha Ran. In my garden I have planted thee. In my garden I have planted thee, my hidden garden, that heart of mine. Thy branches have intertwined within me, and deep thy roots serpentine. From sunrise till nightfall, my garden shall not be stilled. For thou art in it, with thy 1,000 singing birds it is filled. Bubby, that is a poem by Rachel. I don't know if I ever told you, but visiting her, she's an Israeli poet. Visiting her grave near the Kinneret in Israel is one of my favorite memories. And I just wanted to give that to you. And I love you.
Now call on Richard Shore, cousin of Surrie.
Rabbi, Aunt Surrie. My aunt was born in a generation that preferred to be in the background while always being a major influence on everything and everyone who was around her. I remember my mother telling me, my mother is Eva, one of the older sisters, that when she just got her library card, it was Aunt Surrie that would go with her, show her how to get there and back, tell her what books she liked, and then how many she could take that they could both carry back together. My wife Elma remembers when our daughter Marcy was born, and Surrie was the one who showed her the proper way to get a buggy up the curb and down the curb with a baby in it. She may have been small of stature, but she was incredibly strong. One of the memories that is very vivid was when we moved into our first and only home, and Surrie was there when the movers showed up. And there was a discussion among my parents and anybody there where the TV should go. While they're discussing it, and Surrie picks up the TV, puts it in the corner, and that's where it stayed for the next 30-some years. Okay. She grew up in a blended family. Rena, my mother, Eva, Surrie, and Ida. Rena had the same father but a different mother. My mother had a different, Rena had the same father but a different mother. My mother had a different father but the same mother. But woe to be the person that ever said the word half or stepsister, because Aunt Surrie would be in their face instantly. They were her sisters. They called each other every day, all of them. And their children were her nephews and nieces, period. Okay. She was the family chronicler. She knew everybody in the family, where they were on the family branch or tree, even way far down. And I remember one time we get an email from a Patty Moskin, and we didn't recognize the name, and Patty wanted to take us up on her offer to spend the night at our house. We said, sure. Then we called Aunt Surrie. Who is she? Oh, that's Rick Feldman's wife. She just uses a different name. Don't worry about it. If there was any question about family or what was the proper thing to do, Aunt Surrie was the person to go to. And she always knew the right thing to do. There is this saying that when a person passes away, they pass away twice. Once when they physically leave the earth, and the other time when the last person remembers them. For my Aunt Surrie, she was one of a kind. She will never be replaced, and she will never be forgotten.
Please rise for the memorial prayer.
אל מלא רחמים, שוכן במרומים, המצא מנחנך תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים, את נשמת שרה בת משה וריבליה, שהלכה לעולמו. ענה בעל הרחמים הסתיריה, בסתר כנפיך לעולמים. וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתו, ותנוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר אמן.
O God, exalted and full of compassion, Grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure. To the soul of Sarah Bat Moshe Verivalea, Surrie Melnick, who is gone to her eternal home. Master of mercy, we beseech you, remember all the worthy and righteous deeds that she performed in the land of the living. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. The Lord is her portion. May she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, the interment service will continue at Shalom Memorial Park Cemetery, located at 1700 West Rand Road in Arlington Heights. The family will be together today here at the chapel in the North Room following the interment. Hopefully we'll be back here by 3 o'clock to 7 p.m., and there'll be a mincha minyan shortly after the family arrives. Then there'll be a shiva at the Melnick residence at Surrie and Edwards' home at 249 Essex Avenue in Wilmette, Monday and Tuesday from 6 to 9. There'll be a minyan there at 7:30 p.m. Please park on the side streets east of Skokie Boulevard. Memorial contributions in her memory to Beth Hillel B'nai Emunah or the Ark or your favorite charity. All that information is on the service folder, and for those of you who are joining us online, that information is on our website. For those of you who will be driving in the funeral procession, the procession will be forming in our parking lot. Please obtain an orange safety funeral sticker to place on the right-hand side of your windshield. Have your bright lights and hazard lights on at all times. For additional measures of safety, we will be providing many of the cars with a flag that will be affixed to the top portion of your car. We'll have a car in the back of the procession to hopefully keep other cars from entering the procession. And for your own personal safety, I strongly recommend using your horn liberally as you're going through the intersections. And please do not speak or text on your cellular phone while driving to a cemetery. At this time, I invite those of you who have been asked to serve as pallbearers to please come forward as we escort the casket of Surrie Melnick from the chapel to the hearse, along with her family and the rabbi and the cantor. Please rise.